team. And definitely one of the ways how we could achieve agility within the organization is one of the most popular ways is using Scrum. So my focus would be on how to really handle emergencies on a Scrum team, and we'll talk in detail about different approaches that we could take. And so either of one of these approaches would work in your organization or in your project on specific situations. So it's just a kind of a set of approaches that we should be aware of so that we could use it at the right uh, situation. Before we head on, so myself, Avinash, I got around 17 years experience in IT product and service companies. Um, been an agile transformation consultant, help teams on overall coaching and also conducting some of the coaching workshops. I share my opinions and experience on my blog, which is agilebuddha.com, so that if you could go and find a lot of what we discussed today, and also some of the related articles and different specifically with respect to agile, scrum, kanban, and some of the extreme programming aspects you could find on my blog. So I've been consulting clients in Australia, Europe, US, and India, by helping them set up distributed Scrum teams. So I've been involved in some very large distributed Scrum teams of around more than 100 plus. So around like 10 Scrum teams working on single product across multiple geographies. So it's been quite a learning experience. And definitely I try to see how we could apply the thinking of lean in any of the activities that we do under when we want to achieve agility within the organization. So a lot of lean techniques can be applied in the scrum ceremonies to setting up the team structures to really minimizing the waste. So some of those areas are of my keen interest. And then I definitely homeschool my daughter, so bringing some agility into my schooling part of the system also. Okay, so that's uh, interesting picture depicts Scrum. There are a lot of activities that happens within a Scrum team. It's not product prioritization, creation of requirements, analysis, definitely done by the stakeholders and the product owners, and also team getting involved in planning, analyzing the requirements, coming out with a sprint backlog. Plus definitely you're getting into a kind of either a 2 to 4 week sprint to deliver something which is really lovable by your customer, something he would love to take a look at it and share his feedback too. So if you see in this picture, there are so many things that happens, and all these things happens, most of the activities shown here happens within that the sprint duration. And that's commendable. There are a lot of activities that happens within this sprint, uh, um, both from the team, the product owner, and the stakeholder. So definitely for these things to team should be able to achieve within the 2 weeks, they need a lot of focus definitely. You need to remove any kind of roadblocks, any kind of disturbance that come their way, so that we could achieve the sprint goals. But on the path of achieving what we want as part of every sprint, we also need to make sure that there is no such changes that really impact the team during this duration. Okay. Going by Scrum guide, Scrum definitely guide mentions no changes. If you have chosen a 2 week sprint, no changes within that 2 weeks. um, so that's one of the criteria also taken while actually deciding the sprint duration, sprint length. Like what is the right sprint length for us? Like it's, if I see, it's the length that we could try to keep the change out of the sprint. So if it is highly dynamic environments, very very dynamic, probably I have seen teams adopting to a 1 week sprint, and also where they want to get the feedback from the stakeholders sooner. And but if there are a lot of product development companies where things are more stable, people go for 2 weeks to 3 weeks, and even in some complex products I've seen it going up to 4 weeks. So the idea is how to really not to bring new changes within that sprint. But that's a, I think probably is an ideal situation. I don't see it really in many scrum teams. When I really talk to them or when I really coach them, you end up with a lot of changes within the sprint too. Okay, so that has become a norm now, a lot of changes. So now we need to understand how to really handle those changes that are coming within the sprint. So just to give a bit of problem context, so traditional waterfall projects, development team never had to deal with maintenance, and they had a separate team to handle this. So I, being a developer, when I was a developer, I never thought about like who will do the support, who will do the maintenance. It was understood there will be a separate team uh, to handle this, and definitely a lot of developers don't want to work on support teams or maintenance teams. And also the maintenance team definitely had to deal with a lot of nonsense we created, we as developers created. Okay, so more or less you could say the developers had all the fun without any hangovers afterwards. So the maintenance team was brought in after like some a year of long project. Post that, the maintenance teams looks into the code, sees a lot of challenges, unable to make changes. So all those kind of problems actually came in quite late. But in case of now, when we are looking at agile projects, team starts delivering quite early, very often. Probably after a couple of sprints, you have got some piece of code running on the production. So as soon as something is on the production, definitely there will be some new requests coming in, some new defects may arise, new users can start using it, they will start sharing their feedback. So almost a kind of a maintenance mindset or maintenance starts on agile projects right after a couple of sprints. So as soon as it starts, the planning is not easy then. The planning becomes hard for the upcoming sprints because you have got some new maintenance request and you also need to do some new feature development too. So that's the context about the problem. So now what's the problem we are trying to see? So within a scrum, when you are executing within a scrum, there are a lot of incidents happens. The production incidents can be and a lot of unplanned mayhem that really consumes team's time, and because of which team may end up with not able to achieve the sprint goals because just they haven't timed or actually planned for this kind of unplanned activities within the sprint. So and they actually suck up all the team's time, and team may end up with the sprint goals not met. So it could be when we talk about these production incidents or unplanned, it could come from anyone. It could come from the production itself, or it could come from some users, it could come from some sales marketing team or some other stakeholders. So or it could be some real technical issue. So the goal is to observe a reasonable amount of uncertainty so that we strike a right balance between the robustness of the product that we are trying to build or a solution we are trying to build and the speed at which we are trying to build it, and without really sacrificing the main focus, which is a business value that we want to attain out of this. So I'm saying reasonable amount. We know that we cannot handle everything, so we need to take a middle path how we could really take some reasonable amount. So one of the approaches, solution one, is to perform really good triage on any kind of request that comes your way. Many times the production emergency is not really a production emergency, and I've seen this often. Some of the examples which I would want to take here is like sales team coming up with what is called as a deal of the century. No, sales team says, guys, if you can give me this particular feature by so and so time, then I can really win customer Y. So this really disturbs the team. Suddenly they are coming out with some new requirements, and many times this happens because lack of discipline among the sales team, lack of education within the sales team. Okay, it could be the root cause might be completely different. They might have committed something which was not called for, and now they want to save their skin, so they are rushing towards the engineering teams to get this feature delivered sooner as part of the sprint. This is not a production emergency really, or it could be in many stakeholders upgrading some of the normal requests, the normal requirements as production emergencies, so that they get, it's an attempt to bypass the typical normal backlog negotiation. If they have to put this request into the backlog, then it will go through negotiation, it will get prioritized. So they take an easy road by actually saying that this is a production emergency, please take it up soon. So if there is a genuine need, it's fine, we will work on it, but that doesn't classify it under a production emergency. So we need to be very careful about what is a production emergency here. Okay, so a very strong triaging is required to really understand, and then definitely reject. So we need a very strong product owner, a product owner who is available to the team, who is decisive, who can really make strong calls, and he can go back to stakeholders and convince them to. So you can always, one of the things that for argument that can work in your favor is you can always say that you can wait for 2 weeks to get a new feature that you're asking for. Can't you wait for just for 2 more weeks, so that you can really push that into later part? So definitely solution one is more about having a very strong triaging done, and then rejecting it. It's not a production emergency, we'll not take it as part of this sprint. So we need a very strong product owner though there. Solution two. So solution two is about, you definitely do this extension of solution one, and instead of taking it as part of the sprint, you see if it could be deferred, you can defer the fix to the next sprint. So often we also see that there are some issues which are on the production for very long, but as soon as they're found, the stakeholder says we need an immediate fix, which is quite annoying many times. That the problem was on the production for a long time, and now they are found and they need an immediate fix. That doesn't classify as a production emergency though. So such issues can be pushed to later sprint. So sometimes having a very short sprint duration can be very helpful in negotiation, saying that hey, you could we could deliver it as part of the next sprint, which is of just 2 weeks. So when you defer it to the next sprint, then the scrum team really picks it as part of the regular process of so it gets into the sprint planning, it gets prioritized, it's taken into the part of the scrum as part of the sprint, and it's delivered. So it's just a part of the normal process. So next to the decision of rejecting something on the basis it's not a production emergency, a good PO will also make sure everything that can be deferred will be deferred. Okay, so this also once again we are calling for a very good product owner here to take up the solution too. Okay, moving on to the third solution. So if you have done solution one and two, assuming that you have done the proper triage, you have rejected few requests, wherever it was really important, you have pushed it into the next sprint, then whatever that are left are real issues that we have to fix now. Okay, which cannot be deferred, we cannot be rejected, so we need to fix it. So one of the ways that you could do is by reserving a buffer of either in points or in time for such kind of unplanned work within a sprint. So one of the techniques I often go out with using 80-20 principle when I don't have any much of historical data to look at. So if it's a new team, and definitely to start with an kind of an 80% capacity for planned work, for features that you need to build, and 20% focused on only unplanned emergency work. So when I say 80-20, so this is only with to start with, then we may need to really tweak whether it's 80 or 20, how much percentage is required for each bucket. So when you're actually following such kind of a buffer for planning during the sprint planning, we should be careful about few things. So some of the very important parts that we need to be aware of is try to keep buffer not more than 1/5 of the team's velocity. Okay, so because if you keep much bigger buffer, then it will leave a very big gap in the planning process or in your capacity planning, very big gap. So try to keep it as small as possible. Rule 2, buffer is not for backlog items. Never try to negotiate or allow your stakeholders to negotiate something on behalf of the buffer. Okay, keep the buffer till the late part of the sprint, so that if there is any kind of unplanned activities that comes your way, that buffer can help you deal with it. And if it doesn't get used, then you always have a lot of activities that you could do as part of that. Either go back to the product owner and say, Mr. Product Owner, I can pick up like these two smaller stories and I can deliver it. Or you could say that there are few items that came out from our last retrospective that we would want to work on it. But make all these possible options, but definitely do it in the later part of the sprint, assuming that you don't get any unplanned work or any production emergency in that sprint. And we also, the third rule is buffer definitely needs to be protected from unintended use. So the one which I just talked about. So if the stakeholder smells a workaround in the regular process that he cannot push something in the 80% of the capacity, he will try to push it under 20%, the new request also. So definitely that's part of your triage. So be attentive to this part, or be careful about this. And whenever you have got a buffer, as in computer, so you'll always it can have an overflow. So very important is to really measure how much of buffer is really consumed. Okay, so if you know how much of buffer is getting consumed, then you can plan your upcoming sprints releases better. Okay, so one of the principles, like for example, I often try to see is when you plan for a 20% buffer, and if it doesn't get consumed for, say, let's assume in even in this sprint, even in next sprint, I see that, hey, you know what, it's only 15% or 10% getting consumed. So then instead of following 80/20, and after a couple of sprints I may start following like 85/15 kind of capacity. So 85 for planned work and 15% for unplanned work. So this is how you can actually tweak. Don't Nothing is, you need to learn from what you have just done and try to tweak it in the upcoming sprint. So moving on, so definitely all the solutions what we just discussed, solution one, which is about triage, reject, then accepting and deferring it, and uh, uh, so all these three solutions, what we are and also talking about the buffer, so all these three are in logical order to control the damage. Okay, damage which has happened already in the so you need to control. So you take this approach in a sequence order, assuming after 1 2 3. But keep in mind, end goal of any team is to definitely fix the root causes. So if you see there's a lot of production incidents that are coming your way during the scrum, so it's definitely says something more. Definitely the quality that you're embedding into your scrum team, the testing is not happening well. There may be some other issues within this within a scrum or a deployment. So you need to really go and identify what are those root causes. So one of the thumb rule you could say, if by any chance your buffer gets you overflow your buffer, then you have no really business in continuing that sprint. So about that sprint, rather use that sprint to fix the root cause. Okay, so you can when we say to fix the root cause, the problem can be at multiple levels. It could be at the technology level, architecture level, some piece of features that is not tested very well, or it could be the product owner himself is not very strong enough. We may need to revisit or we may need to have him train, coach him. There could be numerous part into the problem. So there could be any of these problems where you need to find the root cause and try to fix that root cause. So but definitely when you're applying the root cause analysis thinking, you could apply a lot of lean techniques like five eyes, which is one of the very favorite of mine, which I usually use it for to identify any kind of root cause in a situation wherein we see, instead of making decisions on the problem, report it, trying to identify the root cause and try to fix it. So you could find more of such five eyes technique and exercises, and a lot of examples on my blog. So if you go and search, then you'll find more on that. Yeah, one of the this is more of a tip that we need to be aware of when you are actually looking for this setting up a team and during the sprint planning is small team performs definitely better because it has a very less overhead, but it is very less robust against losing members. Okay, when we say less overhead, definitely people are highly in a face-to-face mode. They are communicating very well. A small team, the number of people issues reported also is less. So the team is working, gelling very well, but it is also less um, uh, uh, immune to against anything of losing members. When we say losing here, I'm talking about it could be losing a team member to fix a production emergency, or it could be losing him for any kind of medical emergency, or he's going on a leave, or whatever it could be. So if you take an example, a 10% team, losing one person is definitely a 10% productivity loss, so your capacity comes down by so much. But a 3% team is that your capacity is one third, halved, literally 33% loss. So a sweet spot is around 7 to 9 people, as Scrum suggests, and it is small enough to absorb any kind of overhead the team without having any much of overhead on the team, but it's large enough to absorb any kind of person loss. Any it could be losing him for any reasons. So definitely size the team right. This one thing which I've uh, seen it happening, particularly when we are having very small teams. Even if one person gets pulled out, we have got a lot of challenges. Solution 5, to really address any kind of this is, if you go by very typical scrum thinking, definitely scrum doesn't want any kind of changes within the sprint. But if you try to see it from a practical standpoint, and but then a lot of times I see swapping makes a lot of sense. Swapping of not started items within a sprint. Okay, let's see how it happens. So if you're applying a Moscow principle, Moscow is more of must have, should have, could have, won't have. So you take up the sprint backlog, you try to prioritize the sprint backlog. I'm not talking about the product backlog here, sprint backlog. What some are must haves and some can be should haves within a sprint. So as a team, you make sure all the must haves get delivered, even in the worst case, so that you can still go ahead with the release. Even the product owner will be happy with at least having all the covered all the must haves. So definitely have few must um, uh, uh, all the must haves and some should haves when you're doing a sprint planning. And these should haves actually act as a buffer. Okay, so if there is any kind of emergency that comes in, the PO will actually compare that emergency with the should have items. So he looks at it, he says, oh, you know what, this is more or less important, or is it more important than the should have? If it is more important than the should have, you actually swap that item with the should have item. Okay, if it is less important than the should have, you actually take that and push it into the upcoming sprint, the emergency into the upcoming sprint. It's no more an emergency, it's pushed into the next sprint. So this is one quite effective which I often use, is to really swap anything under the should have which is not started yet. Say you're working on 5 stories, the 3 stories are almost done and you get an emergency. So instead of picking up the fourth story, probably you'll swap the emergency item with the fourth story. So this is one very effective solution that you could use to really handle the situations. So a lot of teams, when they're handling these must-haves, they although Scrum doesn't say that, yes, the Scrum says that the independence should be given to the team to really decide upon the sequence in which the team must want to work within a sprint. But team should also make sure that they use the common sense of working on the must-have features first, and later really attacking should-haves in the later part of the sprint. So solution six is about uh, using Kanban approach. Now there has been, you can use a Kanban approach in different situations. One of one of the one of the situation is, if the team is doing, now let's assume you're working on a very long product life cycle, and you built sufficient amount of features, you are on the production, you're live completely, and there are a lot more of maintenance, customization, small changes that are happening rather than any kind of long term features into the product. So in that case, probably using complete Kanban makes sense. If you guys are um, completely you're new to Kanban, then I would suggest you guys go and check on the net more about Kanban. So idea here is, Kanban is about it follows the flow principle. Okay, so more based on the lean principle. So how to achieve flow within the organization or within the project. So within the Kanban, the granularity of what you actually control is at the story level, whereas in case of Scrum, the granularity is at the sprint level. So Kanban has got much better control that we could do, particularly when the situation is highly dynamic. So this is one way. So here what teams do often is also, when they follow the Scrum for a longer product life cycle, and they shift to Kanban to address all the maintenance and support. And once the things get stabilized and new set of features starts needs to be built, they once again go back to Scrum and work on long-term features. This is one way some of the teams follow both the Scrum and Kanban approach. Second way is uh, uh, which wherein you got long-term features are always there to build. So you actually put across two teams instead of one after some time. So one team continues to work on Scrum, and they go on building the long-term features, and you coin the newer team post you go live on production, which takes up Kanban, uses the Kanban board. So that team uses Kanban, and then they handle all the kind of requests that are coming in through sales or marketing or stakeholders or production emergencies. So that's just one of the second methods definitely people use. But I'm not in favor of this method. The reason is, I really don't want to coin a separate support team, because no one wants to work on a support team. You No developer wants to really work on a support team, and I don't want to delegate the work or the chaos I created to be fixed by somebody else. So the third part, when we talked about the 80-20 principle, is for 80% of the capacity that you're planning, you use the Scrum board, and 20% you have a separate Kanban board. So both the boards are maintained by the same team, and that's also will make sure that whatever you are delivering as part of the that 80%, you deliver it really well done as per the engineering practices and also business criteria, because you definitely don't want to get some kind of defects reported later, because you are the one who are going to fix it. So uh, definitely this is the third which I see it quite useful in any of the teams. And so you can use, so you need to understand having Scrum and Kanban as more of a thinking, where you could use depending upon the situation you are in. So these are the some around six different approaches or six different solutions that you could take when you want to really handle any kind of emergencies. So just to conclude, so every team have to deal with emergencies next to regular work. I think there is no doubt about it. I think that has become an pattern now, with changes coming your way always. So so dealing with this, either you take the triaging, accept, reject, or defer to the next sprint. You can also set up a buffer, buffer to absorb uncertainty, but then you definitely need to follow some of those buffer rules so that you don't use the buffer for unintended use. But never shy away from fixing the root cause, because the more you delay fixing the root cause, it's going to really bring down the velocity of the team, or the overall, you can say, the effectiveness of the team. And the team can definitely, we talked about this too, the team can swap features for not started should have items in the sprint. That's one of the very good approaches too. And last, if it is more only maintenance, then the team can transition itself to Kanban completely. So these are the some of the solutions which I want to discuss today. Um, so if you got any specific questions on what we just discussed, I would also want to, if you guys, not now, definitely, if you have got any other feedback and thoughts on anything, then you could share everything on my Facebook page, on my Agile Buddha Facebook page. If you got any questions, please drop those questions on the window. I will try to pick up one by one if you got any of them, and I'll try to answer.